Hello and welcome to the beginning of our study of the book of Ruth. This story takes place in the 12th and 13th century BC. It is a time in antiquity when there was much chaos in the world, particularly the Mediterranean world. The Minoan Empire disappears during this period of time. The Mitanni, the fierce warriors in what would later be called the nation of Assyria, also pulled back from the forefront of history's pages. And a marvelous empire, the Hittites, who had fought Egypt to a draw, also disappeared from the history books, along with their capital city of Hattulashi, and people that we have never heard of who had great power in that time were falling by the wayside. In Israel, God and the nation had a love-hate relationship. God would benefit them, would bless them greatly with abundant crops and rain. And then the Israelites would begin worshiping again the gods of the Canaanites, and God was forced to remove his hand from them until they repented of their sins and turned back to his worship. We see that there were 13 major famines during the period of time that we call the time of the judges, and that's when this story begins. I'm here in Ruth chapter 1, verse 1. In the days when the judges ruled, there was a famine in the land. So a man from Bethlehem and Judah, together with his wife and 2 sons, went to live for a while in the country of Moav. Verse 2, the man's name was Elimelech. His wife's name was Naomi, and the names of his 2 sons were Mahlon and Chilion. They were Epaphrathites from Bethlehem in Judah, and they went to Moav and lived there. Now let's take a closer look at these first 2 verses. In the lead sentence, Verse 1, in the days when the judges ruled, so we've already pinned that down to a time frame, there was a famine in the land, as there were many. So a man from Bethlehem and Judah, together with his wife and 2 sons. Bethlehem is about 7 miles southwest of the city of Jerusalem. And it is in a very dry country. It's not as dry and desert-like as the Negev, but it is quite dry country. And it is home to a clan of Jews who were called Epaphrathites. So if you've ever wondered what an Epaphratite is, Epaphra was apparently the Canaan name for the city that the Jews renamed Bethlehem. So King David was an Epaphratite, and so was Yeshua by birthright. Verse 2, the man's name was Elimelech. That means, my God is king, which is kind of strange because during this period of time, there weren't kings in Israel. They were ruled by these judges like Samson and Othniel and Deborah and these. So the man's name was Elimelech, and his wife's name was Naomi. And Naomi means pleasant, pleasing, easy to get along with, the kind of a person that you just immediately feel at ease and like you've known her for a long time. She was glamorous. She was a good-natured woman and quite attractive. I'm sure her husband Elimelech was very taken with her. But when the hard times came to Israel, these 2 decided to move together with their 2 sons to the land of Moav. And we would call that in modern terms southern Jordan. It is a desolate and dry place to this day. God didn't think much of the place. Elohim, who made the place, didn't think too much of it. He said in Psalm 108, he said, Moav is my washing pot. As Dr. J. Vernon McGee pointed out, a washing pot was synonymous, the same as God was saying, Moav is my trash can. It was not the kind of a place that you would want to go and take a vacation. It was certainly not the place you would want to go and live unless things were really bad where you came from. So, verse 2 again, the man's name was Elimelech, his wife's name was Naomi, and the names of their 2 sons were Mahlon and Chilion. Now, Mahlon means weak, and Chilion means sickly. You can bet that the husband and wife did not name their 2 sons sickly and weak. But these are names apparently we see in looking back in biblical times. And the nation Israel, you were given a name, of course, at birth. It was normally a name that had been used in your family on a repeating basis for generation upon generation. But if you did something that was outstanding or unusual, if you had a character plus or a flaw, you might later be posthumously given that name. And I'm sure that's the case with these two young boys. So the four of them, that is Elimelech, Naomi, and Mahlon and Chilion, head to the country of Moav. Verse 3, now Elimelech, Naomi's husband, died. It doesn't say how soon, but it seems to be pretty much straight away. And it continues, and she was left with her two sons. 4, they married Moabite women, one named Orpah and the other Ruth. After they had lived there about 10 years, 5, both Mahlon and Chilion also died, and so Naomi was left without her two sons and her husband. Naomi and Ruth returned to Bethlehem. We see in this that while her husband seemed to die straight away, her two sons were able to make friends, inroads, and they were married to these two women. Now, these two women are also coming from the land of Moab. They're Shemite, as the Jews are, but they are known to Jews as Goy. That means we would translate Gentile. And the world of Israeli thinking, you're either a Jew or you're a Goyim. It's not a derogatory term. It means anybody other than a Jew, to a Jew. So Ruth and Orpah both were Goyim. They were women who were not Jews, and yet they had married Jewish men who were living in the land of Moab. It's very clear. Verse 6. And when Naomi heard in Moab that the Lord had come to the aid of his people, that is Israel, by providing food for them, she and her daughters-in-law prepared to return home from there. 7. With her two daughters-in-law, she left the place where she had been living and set out on the road that would take them back to the land of Judah, that is southern Israel. Then Naomi said to her two daughters-in-law, go back, each of you, to your mother's home. May the Lord show you kindness, as you have shown kindness to your dead husbands and to myself. 9. May the Lord grant that each of you will find rest in the home of another husband. Then she kissed them goodbye, and they wept aloud. Verse 10. And said to her, we will go back with you to your people. Verse 11. But Naomi said, return home, my daughters. Why would you come with me? Am I going to have any more sons who could become your husbands? Return home, my daughters. I am too old to have another husband, and even if I thought there was still hope for me, even if I had a husband tonight and then gave birth to sons, 13, would you wait until they grew up? Would you remain unmarried for them? No, my daughters, it is more bitter for me than for you, because the Lord's hand has turned against me. There must have been times in your life when you felt the same way. Lord, why me? Why are you letting all these things happen to me? Why are you picking on me? What Naomi was temporarily not in touch with was the fact that God a lot of times uses our perception of bad times, evil things, to turn out to be gloriously for the good. And there is a lesson in there for all of us. Verse 14. At this they wept aloud again. Then Orpah kissed her mother-in-law goodbye, but Ruth clung to her. So we have three women there on a dry, dusty trail, and the three of them are crying by the side of the road, hugging each other. One of them will return home to her own family. The other Ruth that is, has already made a commitment both to Naomi and to the God of Israel. Her words are some of the most stirring that we find in Scripture. And again, bear in mind, Ruth, as a Moabite, is a Gentile, not a Jew. Again, verse 14. At this they wept aloud again. Then Orpah kissed her mother-in-law goodbye, but Ruth clung to her. 15. Look, said Naomi, your sister-in-law is going back to her people and to her gods. Go back with her. 16. But Ruth replied, don't urge me to leave you or to turn back from you. Where you go, I will go, and where you stay, I will stay. Your people will be my people, and your God, my God. 17. Where you die, I will die, and there I will be buried. May the Lord deal with me, be it ever so severely, if even death separates you and me. You see the depth of her commitment. You see the depth of her love for her mother-in-law, Naomi. Isn't that extraordinary? That a daughter-in-law and a mother-in-law could get along in those terms. Verse 18, when Naomi realized that Ruth was determined to go with her, she stopped urging her. 19, so the two women went on until they came to Bethlehem. When they arrived in Bethlehem, back in the land of Israel, when they arrived in Bethlehem, the whole town was stirred because of them, and the women explained, can this be Naomi? Well, you'd think it would be pretty easy for them to recognize Naomi straight away. She had only left about 10 years before, which was a long time, but still within the frame of memory. Another thing we notice about when Naomi returns to Israel, to Bethlehem, she doesn't seem to have property to go to. Probably she and her husband had leased out the land that was their familial land holding. They had leased it out. You could not, if you were a Jew, you could not sell your property. You could lease it out. However, every year of Jubilee, which is every 50th year, that land will and must be returned to the family who owned it. This was Elohim, mighty God's way of keeping the people connected with the land, as he is connected with the land of Israel. So the two women went on until they came to Bethlehem. When they arrived in Bethlehem, the whole town was stirred because of them, and the women exclaimed, can this be Naomi? 20. Don't call me Naomi, she told them. Remember, Naomi means pleasant. Call me Mara. Mara means bitter in Hebrew. Because the Almighty has made my life very bitter. Her use of the word Almighty there would undoubtedly have been El Shaddai, the great one. 21, I came away full, but the Lord has brought me back empty. Why call me Naomi? The Lord has afflicted me. The Almighty has brought misfortune upon me. So, verse 22, so Naomi returned from Moab and accompanied by Ruth the Moabite, her daughter-in-law, arriving in Bethlehem as the barley harvest was happening. This is in the early spring. This is around the time of Passover. We Christians used to call this time Easter. Thank the Lord, we now call it Resurrection Day. But it's the first harvest of grain in the year. Barley does not have the molecular integrity that you can turn it into a product like bread. Instead, barley is more like an oatmeal kind of grain. You can make it into little cakes and carry them around, but they crumble. You couldn't slice it. But it will fill your belly, and it's a good thing to keep you going while the wheat ripens and harvests. So now we've finished the study of chapter 1 of the book of Ruth. I hope you'll join me again next time as we begin examining chapter 2, In the Fields of Boaz. God bless.